On the 11th Sunday of the season, we call to mind the inclusion section of our Unitarian Universalist bylaws, which says, systems of power, privilege, and oppression have traditionally created barriers for persons and groups with particular identities, ages, abilities, and histories. We pledge to replace such barriers with ever-widening circles of solidarity and mutual respect. On this Labor Day weekend, our opening hymn is number 157, Step by Step, the Longest March. Notice that the words are from the preamble to the Constitution of the United Mine Workers of America. Please rise as you are willing and able. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Louise Alcorn, she, her, your celebrant this morning.
Good morning, Des Moines. I'm the Reverend Meredith Garmon, he, him, ze, zir, interim minister.
Welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Des Moines. Our building is located on land that has been home to humans for 12,000 years, starting with people of woodland culture and later the Iowa, Sauk, and Meskwaki. Other animals, such as the heath hen, extinct since 1932, once inhabited these lands. As we enter this space, the ghosts of humans and other animals past are among us. We are called to join in the work of education, reparation, and healing for all species.
We are a people not of creed, but of covenant. We are constituted by our promises, our commitments to each other. As a member congregation of the Unitarian Universalist Association, we covenant to do the work of living our shared values, interdependence, equity, transformation, pluralism, generosity, all centered on love.
Our congregation's bond of union declares our covenant to associate ourselves together for the study and practice of morality and religion as interpreted by the growing thought and noblest lives of humanity, hoping thereby to prove helpful one to another and to promote truth, righteousness, and love in the world.
Our congregation's mission expresses our covenant to love radically, grow ethically and spiritually, and serve justly.
And our aspirational relational covenant is to care for our own well-being, each other's well-being, and the well-being of our community as a whole. We will recognize the inherent worth and dignity of all, be respectful and kind, valuing the gifts and individuality of all. Listen with empathy and consider the impact of our words and actions. Be patient and understanding with each other. Find a pathway and work for reconciliation.
It is a blessing you were born. It matters what you do. Your experience of the divine is true, and you don't have to go it alone.
Today is the 11th Sunday of summer, a time when the days grow shorter, though are still longer than the nights. Compared to the longest day back in June, the sunrise is now an hour later and the sunset an hour sooner. The moon is waning crescent and the new moon begins tomorrow. A special welcome to our visitors. For those of you on Zoom, thanks for tuning in. And please be sure your mic is muted. If you are here with children, there is childcare, or feel free to keep them seated with you or utilize our play area in the back.
Our theme for September is Radical Hospitality. This month's issue of Connecting explores that theme, as will sermons and our small groups and today's forum after the service. Please do pick up an issue there in the basket on the table just outside the doors. We begin with the lighting of our chalice.
On the 11th Sunday of the season, we dedicate our chalice to widening circles of solidarity. Please join me in the chalice lighting words from Vance Bass in your order of service. Every day brings struggle, every day brings joy. Every day brings us the opportunity to ease the struggle of another, to be the joy in another's life. May this flame remind us to carry our light to each other and to the world. Now join in our sung invocation.
This will be kind of an unconventional special music today because we're going to do a sing-along. You don't know the song yet, but just give us a moment. First, let me give a few brief comments about the genesis of the song. About 5 years ago or so, I heard John Lennon's Give Peace a Chance for about the 500th time, and I thought, great sentiment, still good for this time, but where are all the protest songs now? Who's speaking for today? And I thought, it's time. There's a lot of activity socially in this country, and not a lot of songs that kind of reflect that sentiment. So I thought, well, if nobody else is going to do it, I'll give it a try. So bounced some ideas around my head for a bit. Wasn't sure what to do. Started scribbling down some notes, and eventually it became all-purpose protest song. It was less John Lennon, more Woody Guthrie. So what we're going to do, Kent and I are going to sing this through the note. So these pages you have were a last minute, somewhere, a funny thing happened on the way to the forum. I'd sent the copy that you should be looking at. It somehow didn't get printed in your bulletin or printed off, so you can ignore the bold. We're going to sing it through twice. The second time through, I want you to do the echo part, and then we'll do it 2 additional times in which I want everyone to sing bold and boisterously. So here it is, all-purpose protest song.
All right, here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4.
This is an all-purpose protest song.
Protest song.
Once you learn the lyrics, you can sing along.
Sing along.
Just a sensibility.
Civility.
Not the hater's white fragility.
Fragility.
Earth-friendly, BIPOC-friendly, LGBTQ, immigrant-friendly, handicap-friendly, pro-choice too. Oh, we want a better world in which to live.
Which to live.
Don't be a taker, please learn to give.
Learn to give.
Will you join us in our quest for peace?
Quest for peace.
No more fighting. Gotta make war cease.
Make war cease.
Lots of work ahead before we're done to help bring equity to everyone. This is an all-purpose protest song.
Protest song.
Once you learn the lyrics, you can sing along.
Sing along.
Supporting social justice and civility.
Civility.
Not the haters' white fragility.
Fragility.
Earth-friendly, BIPOC-friendly, LGBTQ, immigrant-friendly, handicap-friendly, pro-choice too. Oh, we want a better world in which to live.
Which to live.
Don't be a taker, please learn to give.
Learn to give.
Will you join us in our quest for peace?
Quest for peace.
No more fighting. Gotta make war cease. Lots of work ahead before we're done to help bring equity to everyone. This is an all-purpose protest song.
Protest song.
Once you learn the lyrics, you can sing along.
Sing along.
Supporting social justice and civility.
Civility.
Not the haters' white fragility.
Fragility.
Earth-friendly, BIPOC-friendly, LGBTQ, immigrant-friendly, handicap-friendly, pro-choice too. Oh, we want a better world in which to live.
Which to live.
Don't be a taker, please learn to give.
Learn to give.
Will you join us in our quest for peace?
Quest for peace.
No more fighting. Gotta make war cease. Lots of work ahead before we're done to help bring equity to everyone.
In the spirit of Woody Guthrie. That's right.
All about the unity and the inclusion. Thank you.
Well, that's obviously a hard act to follow. Good morning, and it is a great day. It's another beautiful gift of a day. You have 2 more opportunities to catch Moulin Rouge at the Civic Center. You have a day to catch a game of the Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever game, or do whatever you'd like. But anyway, I better keep to my script. My name is Lynn George, and I am here on behalf of the Unity Circle Board to invite you to be a part of Unity Circle Alliance this year. Unity Circle is a group of members and friends who gather monthly for food, fellowship, and a program. This group has a deep, rich history in our church, dates all the way back to 1879, I read. So September is the time of year that we head back to regular activities and schedules after a summer break. Our minister has returned. I thought maybe we'd hear the choir. Teachers have been busy preparing for first days of school, and your Unity Circle board has been also busy, putting dates onto the church calendar, updating the handbook, but most important, planning interesting programs for you for the upcoming year. So here's the scoop on what you need to know. Everyone is welcome. Unity Circle meets on the third Thursdays of each month here at the church. We start with a delicious potluck. Hey, we're UUs, right? Have a brief business meeting and then a speaker from 1 to 2. And if you can't do the whole thing, slip in for whatever part you can. Our first gathering is going to be Thursday, September 19th. Our speaker will be Jan Kaiser from Annie's Foundation, speaking on banned book activities in Des Moines, including an exciting stop by the bandwagon at Beaverdale Books later in this month. In October, Jamie Fitzgerald will speak on election integrity. So plan to join us, put us on your calendar. We're looking forward to seeing everyone again. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Anna Davis Evans. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm a pastoral care associate for our congregation. Pastoral care associates are here to help members of our congregation talk through and process any significant life transitions. If that is you, I invite you to speak to me here after the service or another of our pastoral care associates, or you can always email our team at pastoralcareteam@ucdsm.org. We don't have any joys or sorrows this morning to share, which always seems like an oddity in this congregation, but we know that we all carry them with us every day, both joy and sorrow. So today I invite you into a new practice with me. When you see someone who's come back to church after braving one of those big, significant life changes, especially sorrows like losing a loved one, let's be extra mindful of how we welcome them back. They may not want to talk, or they may want to talk a lot. They may cry. It will all depend a lot on the day. If you don't know what to say, or maybe don't have a close enough relationship to say anything deep or profound, try this. Place your hand on your heart and simply give them a small nod or a smile. You are in my heart, you are saying without saying a thing. Let us share together now the names of anyone we know who could use some special care and attention. You may call the name out loud or type it into the chat. As we share these names, may the love of this community hold them all.
We are all members of a vast and profoundly interdependent web of life. For some of us, this world, this cosmos, is a precious gift of God. For some of us, this world cosmos is God. In this quiet moment, feel your breath coming in, going out. Feel or imagine the countless connections linking all things to each other and to you. We are in touch with everything, all the joy and all the suffering. And we are alive to the extent that we notice this. We carry always simultaneously the pleasures, the delights, the vigor of the whole world, and the pain, the loss, and grief of the whole world. This is being in touch with everything. We grieve the destructive damage from climate change, from ecological degradation, and how the burden of this damage is borne most heavily by the poor and the exploited. We are in touch with everything, and everything touches us. We hold awareness of climate-related disasters, of heavy rains and flooding. For instance, this week in China's Liaoning province, where heavy rain killed at least 11, 14 more are missing, and forced evacuation of tens of thousands of people. For instance, in Bangladesh, where torrential rains brought floods affecting 2.9 million people, with 70,000 taken into shelters. We are in touch with everything, and everything touches us. We take heart and hope from the good work of so many women and men embodying compassionate service. I mentioned this week those in Philadelphia reducing housing evictions through a diversion program requiring landlords to negotiate. Those restoring wetlands that had previously been drained and are returning again to being flourishing ecosystems that they once were. And those protecting the forests of Malawi's Zomba Forest Reserve. Those developing new communities that integrate senior living with college campuses and daycare centers to offer intergenerational housing to address the loneliness epidemic. And those working to reduce school violence, improving school climate, teaching social and emotional skills, as new federal data shows that continued declines in school violence are ongoing. We are in touch with everything, and everything touches us. We only have to bear that in mind, and that awareness will itself guide us in the ways of love. Amen.
May the light of our community shine on the broken places of the world, and may we not look away when we are needed. May we confront what is cruel, heal what is broken, and delight in what is good. We light 3 candles. 1 for the joys and sorrows shared aloud, 1 for those shared in writing, and 1 for those held silently among us. For all these, we now observe a minute of silence.
Good morning again. Richard Nelson Bowles, the author of What Color is Your Parachute, wrote, "Always define what you want to do with your life and what you have to offer to the world in terms of your favorite talents, gifts, or skills, not in terms of a job title." So how do you figure out what those talents are? Although we are not a denomination that generally goes in for confession, I nonetheless have a confession to make. I have long since, and some of you have heard this, I've long since been convinced that I have tattooed across my forehead in invisible ink that only the lost can see the words, "Ask me, I like to help." How do I know this is true? Because I will go to the grocery store with no makeup on and sweatpants and a paint-stained t-shirt and will be asked by other customers where they can find the tahini sauce or the fish sticks, and of course I will show them. Because I will be walking down the street in a foreign town running a fever and really only concerned about getting back to my hotel, and will nonetheless be stopped by lost Americans asking me in broken German how to get to the torture museum. Yes, this really happened. Ask me, I like to help. So somewhat inevitably, I became a public reference librarian. A few years ago, I was talking to one of my regular patrons and mentioned that we were having a debate about whether to wear name tags to identify ourselves as staff when we're away from a service desk. He said, but Louise, you don't need a name tag. You have helpfulness written all over you. I'm pretty sure this was a compliment. But it got me thinking. At first, literally, I was like, hence, so that's my theory about the invisible ink. I was like, is it actually written on me? Can you see it? Ask me. I like to help. It also made me think about the different ways our personal traits are written upon us. Selfishness, anger, kindness. I believe these are parts of our being that manifest through our physical selves. So why not helpfulness? So in library school, we're taught to have an open face when approaching patrons to make ourselves accessible. My first week, a professor, with some humor, informed me that this was not something I actually needed to learn. Somewhere along the way, I'd already learned it. I thought about the grocery store and realized that they were right. But had I learned it, or rather, was it simply a part of my genetic makeup? Was this why it was written all over me? Was it actually written into my genetic code? Was I actually born with a compulsion to provide service to the public, to be helpful, to give directions to random strangers? We could debate whether this is a personality trait, a neuroses, or a genetically predisposed addiction, but let's take it as read that the compulsion exists. I started to call this trait the public service gene. I even did a church service on this many years ago. Many people find a way to use their experience to guide others. I consider myself unbelievably lucky that my daily work matches up with what is clearly my inner makeup. I basically give directions all day. So let's revisit what Bowles wrote. Always define what you want to do with your life and what you have to offer to the world in terms of your favorite talents, gifts, or skills, not in terms of a job title. Every year at Labor Day, my mentor at Grinnell College would give, we actually had class on Labor Day, and he said, that is because you are privileged. You will never have to labor. He wanted us to understand this very clearly. And he talked about the dignity of work and the dignity of labor. And at that point, I had no idea what I was going to do with my life, but ironically was already working in the library. So clearly, I was on the right path. So find the right work for your genes. Find what you are called to do. Or just read what's on your forehead and go with that. We come now to the offering. recalling the words of the inclusion section of the UUA bylaws. Systems of power, privilege, and oppression have traditionally created barriers for persons and groups with particular identities, ages, abilities, and histories. We pledge to replace such barriers with ever-widening circles of solidarity and mutual respect. The offering, then, is gratefully given and gratefully received.
Thank you for that reflection, Louise. I have spent more time in grocery stores looking for tahini than just about anything else. I can give you a call? Okay. We are exploring hospitality this month. That's our theme of the month, the invitation to reflect on the role of hospitality in your spiritual path. And it is Labor Day weekend. So it is my task this morning to weave those two together to effect your delight and edification. I begin with a poem that Sarah Chang shared during her service a couple Sundays ago. It's a Coleman Barks poem inspired by Rumi. I say it that way because Coleman Barks is the poet single-handedly responsible for the boom in interest in the 13th century Sufi mystic Jalaluddin Rumi. Coleman Barks is a fine American poet. He does not speak or read Farsi Persian. He read English translations of Rumi and he thought, I think I can say better what I think that's saying. I have read some of those earlier English translations of Rumi, and in my opinion, Barks is right about that. He does say it better. But whether what we're getting is more Rumi or more Coleman Barks is an open question. For one thing, Rumi was deeply, devotedly Muslim, and references to the Quran are sprinkled extensively through his poems, but all of that has been erased from the Coleman Barks versions, so I feel like I ought to acknowledge that. Still, this Coleman Barks poem, inspired by Rumi, is lovely and is beloved by many throughout the English-speaking world and is very wise. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. You are a guest house. Hospitality is your job. It's the labor. See what I did there? The joyful labor of being human. Hospitality involves the skill of making other people feel welcome, assured that they belong. And what Rumi, by way of Coleman Barks, tells us is that every experience is like a person. Every emotion, every passing fear or sadness or moment of joy, every momentary awareness, every problem or challenge is like a person to be welcomed and entertained and assured that they belong. You could try to keep out those guests that you find unpleasant, and I guess you probably have tried to suppress feelings that you didn't want. But if you don't welcome at the front door, emotions have a way of sneaking in through the back door. Hospitality is about welcoming all of your life into your life, and that includes other people. Now, on this Labor Day weekend, I want to share with you a story about the origin of Labor Day and how we came to have this holiday. It is fundamentally a story that has its roots in the impulse toward hospitality, wanting to be hospitable, but not hospitable to everything. When our hospitality isn't radical, when it isn't extended, as Barks and Rumi say, to whatever comes, when we want to welcome what is fun and joyous and slam the door on what is dark and hurts a bit, then things won't work out so well. Labor itself is the mixing of what is hard with what we hope is rewarding, intrinsically rewarding ideally, and at least extrinsically rewarding, but even when intrinsically rewarding, still sometimes unfun. We happen to inherit a tradition in which labor is punishment. In the Genesis story, the original humans ate of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and Yahweh kicked them out of paradise and gave them labor. Yahweh was strangely gender-specific about that, in keeping with the culture of the time from which these stories emerge. The woman's labor is childbearing, the man's labor is working the fields. So labor is what we have to endure because we ate of a tree and got called out. We go out of Eden and into labor. Kind of a tough break. The interpretation of that Genesis story that makes more sense to me is one offered by Rabbi Lawrence Kushner in Eyes Remade for Wonder. Kushner suggests the whole thing was a setup. Like any good parent, God knew that to grow up we would have to leave home, and so put that tree there to create a pretext for kicking us out. We've read it all wrong. God was not angry. God rejoiced at our disobedience and then wept with joy that we could feel our estrangement and want to return home. The return home, however, is not easy. It is, in fact, labor. And the labor of making our own way home and the labor of making others feel at home turns out to be the same labor. Whether or not labor seems to us to be a pain or a drudgery to endure just to pay the bills, there is before us also the prospect of labor as the path home. And so let me relate the cautionary tale of industrialist George Pullman, born 1831. George Pullman founded the Pullman Palace Car Company that manufactured railroad cars, particularly the Pullman sleeping car. In 1880, he bought 4,000 acres, 14 miles south of Chicago, got an architect to design not only his new plant for making railroad cars, but a whole town. Houses for 10,000 workers, shopping areas, a church, theaters, parks, a hotel, a library, all owned by one man. He built and owned the power plant that powered his factory in his town. The town was named after him, Pullman, Illinois. Pullman's workers worked for him, lived in houses owned by him, paid their rent and their utilities to him, shopped in stores owned by him, and strolled in his parks. He was, in his way and in his mind, being hospitable to his workers. His aim was to solve the issue of labor unrest and poverty. Labor unrest for his own industrialist motives, but at least he had the insight to see that to do that required tackling poverty. For years, George Pullman had been a philanthropic supporter of fine schools with the aim of providing businesses with a better quality of laborer. He wanted a happy, loyal workforce, so his town provided for all his workers' needs. They got a state-of-the-art home, indoor plumbing, gas lights, sewers, well above the average dwelling of the time. They got fine country air and beautiful neighborhoods. And the mortality statistics indeed established that Pullman, Illinois was one of the most healthful places in the world to live. The town created a national sensation. The press praised Pullman's benevolence and vision. To ensure that there would be no unhappiness, Pullman prohibited outside agitators, allowed no saloons or a vice district. The hotel on the edge of town had the town's only bar, and it was open only to visitors, not the residents. He prohibited independent newspapers, public speeches, town meetings, or open discussion. He wanted his workers to have clean homes, so his inspectors regularly entered homes to inspect for cleanliness and could terminate leases on 10 days' notice. Private charitable organizations were prohibited. Pullman was showing hospitality, but on his own rather restrictive terms, which isn't real hospitality at all. He built only one church building in his town, the Greenstone Church. Pullman's plan was that all religious denominations would band together and share the one building. But the various denominations would not unite, and no single denomination could afford the rent, so the church stood empty for the town's first 7 years until Pullman finally slashed the rent by 2/3, and the Presbyterians rented it. But it all came crashing down. And I will tell you about that after our interlude. Bruce, how about something ironically cheerful? Perfect. Then in 1893, the stock market crashed. The railroad bubble, overbuilding railroads relying on shaky financing to do it, burst. The Panic of 1893 was, at the time, the worst economic depression the United States had ever experienced. 150 railroads closed. There was massive unemployment. Pullman cut his workers' wages by 25% or more. He did not, however, reduce the rents he charged his workers for living in Pullman, Illinois. Hospitality sometimes entails sacrifice, and Pullman wasn't willing to share in the sacrifices of hard times. The next year, 1894, 4,000 Pullman employees went on a wildcat strike. Wildcat because it wasn't authorized by the workers' trade union officials, which was because they didn't have any trade union officials, which was because Pullman didn't allow labor unions. And then organizers for Eugene Debs's American Railway Union came in and signed up many of the striking workers, and the Pullman strike spread. Soon, 100,000 railroad workers across the country were refusing to handle trains with Pullman cars. The strike shut down much of the nation's freight and passenger traffic west of Detroit. Various sympathy strikers prevented transportation of goods by walking off the job, obstructing railroad tracks, or threatening and attacking the replacement workers the railroads sought to hire. At its peak, the strike involved 250,000 workers in 27 states. Pullman called up his friend and railroad director, United States Attorney General Richard Olney. With President Grover Cleveland's backing, troops were sent to Chicago. The federal government secured a federal court injunction against the union, against Debs, and against the top leaders, ordering them to stop interfering with trains that carried mail cars. They refused to stop interfering. The Army moved in to stop the strikers from obstructing the trains. Violence broke out in a number of cities, inflicting millions of dollars in damages and killing 30 people. The Army broke the strike. Debs went to prison for violating a court order. The railroads fired and blacklisted all the employees who had supported the strike. As soon as the strike was over and the trains were running, President Cleveland and Congress moved to make conciliation to organized labor. 6 days after the 1894 Pullman strike ended, legislation was pushed through Congress declaring the first Monday of September was a federal holiday, Labor Day. So that, dear ones, is why we have Labor Day. It is the consolation prize we got after the feds sent in troops to protect corporate interests and break up a strike. It was a bone to try to head off further conflict. And they put it in September instead of giving official recognition to the more widely known International Workers' Day on May 1st because they wanted to pull attention away from the more radical labor movements. This story of conflict between management, the wealthy, the controllers of capital, and people whose labor they want to make use of, whether slaves or indentured servants or laborers, is the central and ongoing story of our country. This is who we are as a people. Labor union membership peaked in the 1940s and 50s and has been declining ever since. There are 6.4 million working poor as of 2021, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. On the weekend for celebrating labor, those who labor and aren't paid enough to not be poor, let us particularly remember. The story of George Pullman is of particular salience to us Unitarian Universalists. This story, the story of the industrialist who owned an entire town, ruled over it, sparked a national strike, and then brought in the army to violently break that strike, is our story. Quite specifically. You see, George Pullman was one of us in a very direct sense. George Pullman was a Universalist. Born, raised, and lifelong. George's father raised a Baptist and his mother raised Presbyterian, converted to Universalism, drawn to the God is love message of the Universalist minister Thomas Eaton. George's dad often led the services when no preacher was available. The Pullmans were a devotedly and devoutly Universalist family. Both of George's two older brothers became Universalist ministers and were prominent figures in our faith. Late in his life, George Pullman had a Universalist church built in his hometown, Albion, New York, as a memorial to his parents. Industrialist George Pullman was born, lived, and died a Universalist. And something of the Universalist outlook may be detected in his life and actions. He believed his workers deserved decent accommodations. He saw that education was a win-win. It made workers' lives better and made them more useful workers for businessmen like him. I have faith, Pullman told the press, in the educational and refining influences of beauty and beautiful and harmonious surroundings. Pullman had a kind of Universalist hope that different denominations could come together and worship together in one church. There is a certain idealist utopian strain of thought in the planning of his town. Liberal religion is characterized by an optimism about human possibility. From our beginnings 450 years ago, Unitarians and Universalists have been people who rejected the Calvinist conception of humankind's total depravity. That optimism about human capacity is displayed in Pullman's vision of a company town where everyone was happy and productive. In his case, it didn't work out. Shortly after Pullman's death in 1897, courts ordered the homes sold to individual homeowners. What went wrong was that pride and control took over. Yes, people can get better, they can learn and grow, but they have to do so in their own way. That is the key to genuine hospitality, not merely meeting what you think their needs are, but journeying with them in the discovery of those needs. Growth, learning, and development cannot be all planned out with precise outcomes determined in advance. Pullman believed in human improvability, but didn't believe in people enough to let them work out their own growth, their own awakening and salvation in their own way, even if they used their freedom to go backwards for a few years or a few generations. And even if, left to their own devices, they drank or listened to speeches from agitators or read independent newspapers or gathered and discussed unsavory ideas. Pullman would not listen to his workers' needs. And we can't ever be so arrogant that we won't meet and talk and consider where other people are coming from. And so for Labor Day, remember George Pullman, the industrialist, whose meanness sparked the events that led to the creation of the holiday. And remember George Pullman, the Universalist, who got the optimism but didn't get the humility, because we Unitarian Universalists today follow in his footsteps in more ways than it is comfortable to admit. When has your voice of "let's make it better" come out as "fix it my way or I will treat you as an evil obstructionist"? When have your own ideals made you cruel? I think we do that every time we think someone else is wrong. Then let this be our Labor Day prayer, to find the courage of hospitality, to talk to the people we think are wrong and stay at it until we get over ourselves. God rejoiced at our disobedience, said Rabbi Kushner, and then wept for joy that we could feel our estrangement and want to return home. We feel the estrangement. My challenge to you and to myself is to talk face to face with someone you think is wrong. It's election season. It's not hard to find them. The hard part is talking to them. and keeping a civil tongue even if they don't. And that is hard. We feel our estrangement. So many of our fellow citizens have such anger and fear that it's easy for us to get angry at and a little afraid of them. The labor of hospitality, of returning home. One small step toward one small mend in one small relationship at a time. That labor is ours to do. May we take it up. Blessed be. Amen.
Please rise as you are able and join us in singing hymn 128.
For all that is alive, sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift, which we are called to use to build the common good, and make our own days glad. For needs which others serve, for services we give, for work and its rewards, for hours of rest and love, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life, for sorrow we must bear, for failures, pain, and loss, for each new thing we learn, for fearful hours that pass, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life, for all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift, which we are called to use to build the common good, and make our own days glad.
Please say with me now our unison chalice extinguishing words, as those of you at home extinguish your chalices. We extinguish this chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
You are welcome. You belong. You are accepted. And use that to go forth and make others feel welcome and belonging and acceptance. Go in peace.